We're dealing with a completely new technology and a new way of thinking about hardware. It was celebrated, tens of millions of views. They had 50,000 orders. They were expecting a few hundred. I do think there's going to be this rejection of mobile phones in the next 5 to 10 years.
Could we be seeing the death of the mobile?
The Rabbit R1 will fundamentally eliminate the use of a smartphone.
I thought it's a terrible product. I truly don't think audio in isolation is the solution we need.
All right, I'm sure another solution will present itself.
Have we made it in New York yet? Are you getting stopped in the street?
I haven't had anyone stop me in New York or the UK yet, so I'm yet to have that experience whatsoever.
In this week's episode, we talk about measurement, what metrics truly matter in marketing. We talk about the silent majority, something that brands should not forget about. We have a deep dive into personal brand, why it's important, where you should focus your energy. We talk about launching products, Catman versus Rabbit. What do I even mean by that? And why is this going to lead to a new hardware revolution? And we finish our conversation talking about Web3. The bull market is officially here. Get back in the casino and you're all going to get rich.
Catty coin is dropping tomorrow. Mint. Before it's too late.
Catty coin. Cat coin. Catman, good to see you. How you doing?
Good to see you, man. Doing well, doing well. I'm also saying hi to your little gold astronaut on the left there as well.
How cool is this? You know when you grow up and you have an obsession, it might be dinosaurs, it could be space. Mine was always Egypt, so this is completely abstract, has nothing to do with Egypt. But more recently, I've been watching a lot of documentaries about space, and I was going through Home Bargains, #ad, walked past this, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to get it. And I try and avoid clutter and not fill my life with pointless things that I don't need, but I think it's pretty cool.
I think it reminds me of the MTV Music Video Award. I thought that's what it was.
Well, maybe it is. Maybe I should have started with my MTV Music Video Award. It's good. What's going on in your world?
Not much. Just first week back. Back in New York, that is. And good energy in the air right now.
I remember you once saying to me when I first moved to New York that January was your favorite time of year because it gets rid of all the tourists and all the riffraff.
It's bitterly cold.
Yeah, I can remember a few nights out, but this is before the watershed, so I probably shouldn't disclose what Catman and all's adventures were like in Manhattan. Dude, I want to tell you a story, actually. We have some fans of the podcast. It's really rewarding. You know how we set out and we kind of do this to have a regular conversation, to unpick our ideas, debate topics we like, stay curious around marketing. It's really interesting. So for that reason, I stay away from the data. I'm a creative and data-led marketeer, but in this pursuit, I don't look at any of the numbers. And I was speaking at an event 2 days ago, and it was a really kind of star-studded, personal brand type event. And I really enjoyed it thoroughly. It was a real privilege to be on stage with a lot of people. I got off after, and there was a networking room, and I went around the room, and firstly, a few people commented on my outfit. I've never had more dudes come up to me and say, "Where did you get those trousers from?" And the honest answer, this is going to sound very uncool, but this is M&S autograph collection. Was getting some serious props. You never thought you'd say cool and M&S in the same sentence, but I just did. But beyond my choice of fashion, what I was really encouraged by, 5 people I counted came up to me and said, I've come down here to watch this thing and I'm a massive fan of Memes&Machines. And it really anchored me, and like a lot of gratitude that this are random rants each week kind of give value to people. That's rewarding in itself. The second thing was it reminded me of something we often forget, the silent majority. You often think about interactions you have in the world and you'll never know how they influence people. I think about this a lot of publishers and authors. You know, when you publish a book and 50,000 people read that book, you never know the profound impact that you're going to have on that person's life. And we live in a world predominantly dominated by social media, and we get obsessed with metrics. And by, I suppose, in a room of 250 people, 5 of those people coming up to me saying they're a massive fan of the podcast, I just go, I'm reminded of the silent majority and how social metrics and numbers can often be misleading. And I think it's really important if you're an individual trying to build a personal brand, if you're a company or a business, I think it's really important to acknowledge impact and not just focus on vanity and scale. But I don't know if you've had a similar experience. Have we made it in New York yet? Are you getting stopped in the street?
I haven't had anyone stop me in New York or the UK yet, so I'm yet to have that experience whatsoever. But no, you're right. I think it's like the quality of the people that you reach is often missed in social because everything is so inflated and hidden. I think the closest you get is LinkedIn telling you when the type of companies who viewed a post or viewed your profile. It's actually probably the richest data we get on our audiences without having to do some kind of real digging. We've recently, or yesterday rather, launched a campaign where we released a report, and the report was a deep dive into the last 12 months of Web3, kind of exploring the use cases, the apps, the kind of exciting growth that's happening. An interesting point there, it was actually mostly content that we'd already created throughout the year, but we basically repackaged it, repurposed it, updated a few pieces into this kind of report, and then put it in this very flashy website, made it a very cool experience to download it. But in order to download it, you have to put in your email. You then get the report, delivered to you. And we've had around 1,000 downloads in 24 hours, which sounds like a low number. But then when you look at the back end and you see the emails that are coming through, we're seeing massive names, people like eBay, people like Mercedes-Benz, all the biggest Web3 companies that we want to reach. And all of a sudden, everyone's getting really excited. It's like, holy shit, we have these huge leads. We have meaningful people who are, again, spending deep time with our brand. They're reading through this 30-page report. And it's only these kind of times where you get a glimpse of the quality of people you reach. Usually, if we were to release a video, we'd see 5,000 views and think, it's kind of a flop. But you just don't know the caliber of the people you're reaching. And it's good to get those little reminders that actually it's usually the compounding effects of, hundreds of thousands of these moments where you're reaching the right people over and over and getting them to spend meaningful time with your brand. And podcasts is another great example where there are people spending 30 minutes of their day, which is unheard of in a world where, our attention spans are 7 seconds. And so I see the parallels with the report is the same thing. We can see in the back end, people were, 25% of people read all 30 pages, which is, 10, 20 minutes out of their day. And it's just rare to get that kind of attention.
I agree. I think it's a good point, a broader point around what are you measuring? I think we get fixated on attribution metrics, users, sales, the kind of outcomes of marketing activity. I think we get fixated on the other end of the spectrum, scale, vanity, impressions, likes, engagement. And then there's almost this big, wide-ranging set of metrics you could look at that are very strong signals of whether what you are doing is effective. It was interesting you describing the white paper. We do quite a lot of B2B marketing, and people don't know that about Flight Story. And I find B2B marketing fascinating because I think it's one of the lowest bars in advertising, because people behave in a certain way, thinking they have to behave differently because they're speaking to a business. And my number one rule is you are never speaking to a business, ever. Always speaking to a person. Buying cycles will be more complex. There may be more stakeholders involved in a buying decision in B2B, but fundamentally it's always people. So I think people maybe get the wrong idea with B2B. And I was conducting an interview at Flight Story with an exceptional marketeer, great person, and they gave some amazing observations in their interview task. And one of the things I didn't like, and I called that out to them, was white papers. I've always been against it for ourselves, and it's only because of effort versus reward. And he described as a buyer, he's changed my mind, and you saying this has just reaffirmed it. I would always go, you have to put so much effort in producing a quality report, like so much resource to then get, you're saying 1,000's underwhelming. Most people get like 50, 100 downloads and have to pay through the nose to get that, right? But the way you described that about time spent and quality, and the call out from him was exactly that, around like, as a buyer, he loves to get into trends. He loves to look at awards. He loves to, all these things that I've kind of resisted in my maybe ego, arrogance, or because we're really good at content marketing as a business. I recognize my own bias, and you telling me this story, I go, two things. I need to have a deeper appreciation for like depth and quality pieces of marketing content and literature. And number two, we need to look at what we're measuring. So when you think about Third Web right now, what is your, I suppose, KPIs that you value specifically?
It's really it's an interesting time to ask that question, because the business has now evolved. We've just turned on revenue a few months ago, so all of a sudden, our metrics are now starting to shift. If you think about year one of a startup, it's just get people through the door, and it doesn't really matter who. It's just make a lot of noise. And so our metrics were very much on reach. How do we make the most noise how do we make as much noise as possible? How do we increase our awareness in as many places as possible? And then as the business has evolved, especially in an industry like ours, you start to have to really pick between who are the serious customers and who are people who are probably not going to convert further down the funnel. And at the end of the day, we are a software business, and that means that we have to eventually convert people into paying customers. And so a huge part of our work now is shifting from, let's just make as much noise as possible, to let's identify who are what we call like quality users. And that means, how do we, similar to like we've been talking about, how do we form marketing activities which go deeper and which form stronger relationships with fewer people, but those fewer people are worth 10 times more to us than, 10,000 of the wrong people.
Okay, devil's advocate on that though. Often when you achieve scale, the byproduct is you reach enough people, you kind of get the depth you need. It's often a tell that more people like you, and of course you'll get maybe less qualified leads, if we want to use that term, or users that aren't super users. Have you shifted your perspective as a consequence of kind of now being more sales focused or revenue driven?
No. So I think that's a good nuance here, is that I'm still heavily in your camp, where I still think content marketing and being able to achieve scale consistently will win. But it's now being able to pair the two together. So for example, we produced a report yesterday. We know how to distribute it in a way where we're producing content which is going to be shared widely on social. And then there's this kind of like further down the funnel piece of activity that converts people. I completely agree that I actually think that still the way we're going to win is with scale. And by doing things which reaches more people than our competitors will, because we understand those like kind of magnitudes, those exponential growth tactics. But I think it's the pair of them. it's like being able to pair the two and being able to play in both camps that makes you really powerful.
Yeah, it's closing the loop, and marketing is often about choices. If you can do one thing really well, you probably should focus on how do you earn attention through great content, storytelling on a consistent basis. If you've got that cadence and the resource then to be a bit more pointed and focused, the problem I see from most businesses is they start very narrow. They start with the end in mind, and they never truly learn the skills or have the processes and the systems, the know-how to really win on the what I would say the more creative end of marketing. And what I'm seeing is a macro shift as things get more commoditized in content. Contents get commoditized. There's people now hacking Google with AI to generate thousands and thousands of articles. People are creating automation agents that are like long form podcasts that's now getting transcribed, that's turning into 1,000 different articles, that's then dropping into a mailer list, that's then auto tracking and sending personalized emails. So people are building these kind of systems around marketing. And as a consequence, I think we're going to step further and further away, or I say not further away, should I say, I think as a consequence, the creative art is really going to be put on a pedestal. And I'm for it.
Yep.
I celebrate it, right? I think we spent too long in the weeds of marketing.
I agree. I think all this, I think growth hacking culture, which is now, again, like you said, it's being 10x because of AI. It feels like a race to the bottom, right? Where everybody's just going to be competing for these, scalable marginal gains. But actually, what's going to win in the end is brand. Like being able to reach more people through brand marketing, and then people know you off the top of their heads. And that's why we do things like the report, because, a large part of it isn't because we want people to read the report, but we want to be seen to be one of the voices in the industry who have that high brand equity, and we are a voice of authority within Web3. And even the optics of producing something like that, we work with a big data partner. We partnered with 10 or 15 of the biggest names in the industry. These small things, they just do, we're a team of 5 marketing people, right? We're trying to do things which look bigger than we are. And I do think that brand is going to win in the end. And there's all these growth hacking things we can do. We're scraping emails right now, and we're putting together lookalike audiences for ads, all this stuff. I think they convert in the short term, but for me in the long term, it's brand marketing that's always going to win.
It reminds me a little, I don't know if you've been or if you're in your health kick mode where you're going to the gym more regular, whatever, the January thing that we all do. It reminds me of when you see people really get into the weeds of exercise training, and they do these obscure kind of adjustments. And really, if you want to get big and strong, you do the basics, you do compound movements, the meat and potatoes, as they like to say in Yorkshire.
Yep.
You do the squat, you do the big compounds. And that's how I see marketing. I believe great teams, 70-80% will focus on the longer and the mid-term. The only thing that can allow you to transcend your functional benefits is your brand, what people think about you. You say to me now, Catty, name me a cereal brand. Genuinely, 2 names will come to mind. I'll go Kellogg's. Sure, they've spent hundreds and hundreds of millions on marketing over many decades. And you know who else I'll say? Cereal. Probably spend a couple of $100,000 every year on marketing, maybe a bit more than that, but you get the point. They are putting content and creative right front and center of what they do. You could say the same to me about, I don't know, pick a dating app. Say dating app, I'll go Thursday. What have Thursday done really well? They've captured through content marketing. So yeah, the number one job of all of us is we're in the attention economy. We need people to form an opinion of you. We need people to come, care, think. So yeah, brand all the way, my man. And talking of brand, I want to ask you about personal brand. I had and I sound like I'm on repeat now, but at the event that I was speaking, a lot of the narrative, because the audience was businesses, was about personal brand building. And one of the speakers there was called Stephanie, and she wrote a book, I believe, in COVID called what did she write? Fuck something. Fuck being humble. She turned that into a business. She wrote a book called Fuck Being Humble, and it's a lot about personal brand, a lot about removing your inhibitions and your Britishisms around humility, and being the biggest advocate for you. And she did a phenomenal kind of keynote and session, and you always know a good keynote when number one, you're entertained, and number two, you feel inspired. And I listened to that one, and I felt inspired, and it really got me thinking a lot more about personal brand and how we've demonized it, and it's become a dirty word. Number one, how are you thinking about personal brand in 2024? Number two, where are you spending your time, and where should people be building their personal brand?
I think we spoke about it a little bit last week, where I think for me the main thing is like really embracing the unique components about yourself, where I think it's very easy now to get caught up in the formulas behind personal brand. There are so many, and it's become a business for many. And so there's a lot of, I guess, like wallpaper when it comes to especially business content. And so I think having a unique voice and avoiding ChatGPT, I've seen to be probably the most effective way that people are going to like craft something that people remember and connect with. I think video, and this is obviously one of the reasons we did this, video is probably the most powerful form of personal branding, because being able to connect somebody's face and voice with their ideas is just very rare. It's like a higher barrier to entry, so fewer people do it, and you really do stand out. And like we've been talking about impact. 1,000 people watching watching us talk about something every week is actually very, it's really memorable in terms of who we are as people. And I'd say if you really want to stand out, those are the two things you can do. For me, obviously LinkedIn is like the number one platform right now that people focus on. But I do think Twitter, I have found, particularly in certain industries, has a kind of enhanced quality of person that you can reach. For whatever reason, it seems to be somewhere where you're able to really connect with people who are like closely, kind of more closer to your industry, or closer to the thoughts that you share. So I think a combination of those two is really powerful.
My guy, you just sounded like such a Twitter elitist. One of the things about Twitter creators, there's a smugness about them. There's a pretentiousness about people, and you should be saying X. Stop saying Twitter. Twitter's old, bro. You should be saying X, and you lived up to the hype. You know what? I think TwitX, I think you have to be a really great copywriter. I do think you have to be, and I do think it's a bit like intellectual porn, whereas you would argue the barrier to entry to create popular content on LinkedIn is lower. One thing I would add about a personal brand, I think there's an easy way to build one, and there's a hard way. The easy way is talking about building a personal brand and just putting out generalisms that go far and wide and everybody can connect with. Let's call it entry-level personal brand. The easy way beyond that, I'd say the intermediary way, is pick a singular topic that is very niche and be laser focused. I am going to talk about AI applications, specifically video editing tools, and that is it. And I'm going to do it in a certain way. That's also a way to build a niche, a community, and I suppose find your crowd. A little harder than the entry-level stuff. I think the hardest personal brand to build is maybe the most rewarding long-term. And I would say it's kind of what I'm personally trying to do, and I can't speak for you, but I will not allow myself to fall into the trap of chasing engagement and numbers. I'm very aware if I went very focused on one singular topic, I could probably amass a much greater scale audience much faster. But you know what? I create for myself in many respects to learn, to round off my ideas. And it wouldn't be authentic to me if I didn't talk about technology and marketing and people and silly things. And because I care about a lot of this stuff. So the minute I felt enclosed into a niche, I couldn't connect with that idea. But I am acutely aware that there's probably a sweet spot between being really authentic and passionate or showing a side of you as a personal brand. But yeah, I agree with you. I'd also say if you are a young person or any person, I fundamentally believe you should create on TikTok. I think you should create on TikTok. And I think you should pick another platform of a professional pursuit. That's my opinion. Pick two. And they're very different. If I was thinking about what would I want to say on TikTok, I don't know. I kind of regurgitate the same thing. But the reality is, a probably more interesting narrative on TikTok would be me talking about a business journey. Whereas all my other pursuits are focused and geared around my, I suppose, curiosity in marketing and technology. But I think you almost have to find spaces for your brand to live that feel authentic.
Yeah, I think the final thing I'd add there is just talking about work that you do, which I think is the piece people forget, and it's probably the scariest thing to do because there's this, you're putting yourself out there and you're opening yourself to criticism, and there's just that extra anxiety. But for me, the most powerful people I follow is, I want to hear from people who actually have done the work and who have executed on something other than a personal brand, right? Because then their ideas have been validated in a different arena. And a lot of people do incredible work and they just don't talk about it, or they don't know how to talk about it. And they probably fall into a trap of, most people on LinkedIn are just talking about like the latest ad they saw, or reposting a Coca-Cola thing, but actually talking about the work you've done, which is specific to you. I think that's always going to interest people more, and you're going to attract an audience of people who are interested in the work you do rather than, you talking about other people's.
Yeah, I interviewed someone based on, I don't believe they have a following, but they once commented on something I did and disagreed with me. And it was a very respectful debate, and fundamentally they were wrong. But I always appreciate their ideas they put into the world. And I reached out to them when I was on and said, hey, I'm in town. Do you want to have a quick coffee? And we're probably going to try that person, trying to offer them an opportunity. And I think that's always really telling just from a career standpoint. I'll tell you one other anecdote, and I feel such a... I'm on Groundhog Day, but it is very present in my mind. So at NatWest Business Live, the event I was speaking of, Gary Vee was on, and he did a Q&A after his talk. And you know how, I don't know if you've ever watched Gary's events when he speaks, and he kind of breaks down people's businesses. He's quite famous for doing it. Someone says, hey, I'm building this business, I'm doing this. Young guy gets up, he's built a toothpick business, like flavored toothpicks. And if you go back to the 50s, toothpicks was dead popular, and they've had pockets of moments in time.
Yeah.
And he's just created flavored toothpicks. They're crazy expensive, probably crazy big margin. And I think he's built like a really big following on TikTok, just like toothpicks, and it's a good alternative. And I could see, and he asked Gary, and I could see a world where that has its moment. And there's like a really cool business around toothpicks. Not that you ever... it's not the most obvious place when you're thinking of your entrepreneurial endeavors, but I massively respect it. And what he did, he got on stage, asked Gary to try the toothpick. He literally got his like moment, a viral clip. They had this banter back and forth. He did all his plugs. This has all been recorded. And I just thought, credit to you having the having the bravery to get up, ask the question, and it's rooted again in the book "Fuck Being Humble." I'm giving that another plug because I thought that was good. It's like you should advocate and drive those opportunities, and I've always felt uncomfortable doing things like that. It's never felt natural to me, and the reality is, I don't think it feels natural to anyone. But you do have to massively respect those that stand up and try and those that stand up and ask. I thought there's a lot to be said in. I think that young guy is going to go on to be very successful. Good communicator, cool little business, whether it's this business or another. He knew how to take advantage of the moment and capture attention. And I think that's a really valuable skill in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and it also is social proof for the product. If the founder isn't excited about the product, then why should anyone else be? Which is probably a good segue into one of the topics we wanted to talk about, which was the R1 Rabbit demo, which came out this week.
Catman, I knew the cat wanted to talk about the rabbit. R1, for anyone that doesn't know and hasn't seen this, R1 is a new hardware. Came out, and if you remember, a month or so ago, there was another hardware, Humane AI, the pin with the naff little, I don't know, what was it, like a projector that was from one of the lead designers at Apple, came out and did his Steve Jobs impression. And I believe was mocked excessively for a rubbish product. R1 came out, a different type of hardware, and tell me what you think. Why was it so good?
Well, we don't know if it's good or not, but what we know is that people celebrated this launch. They were excited by it. They lauded the founder in a way that the pin was not. And like we just talked about, a lot of this came from the fact that when you watch the launch video for the Humane pin, with the founder doing his Steve Jobs impression, this most recent one was also a Steve Jobs impression, but one was a lot more successful than the other. The first one, the Humane pin, and this isn't a criticism of the founder. This is probably just the way he is. I've worked with a lot of founders who are low energy, but they're incredible operators, incredible executors. But he is by definition low energy and talks in this very kind of calculated, slow manner. And it came across as unexcited by his own product. Whereas, and this is my first observation, the second launch, which happened this week, the Rabbit R1, the founder was energized. He was excited. And I think that was the first thing that happened. It was easier to get invested. You were kind of hooked by his communication style. One other observation about this launch video is that it was around 20 minutes long, which I think is really interesting if you think, like, again, in a world where we're obsessed with getting to the point. In this launch video, he took around 5 to 10 minutes before he actually introduced the product, which is unheard of in the kind of, again, the attention economy that we operate in. But I think they recognize that we're dealing with a completely new technology and a new way of thinking about hardware. And so the context that he gave was actually really important. And that's what we were missing with the pin launch, is that it was very short and it got straight into the product. But we as humans, we don't have the mental models to understand why we need this yet. And so with the Rabbit launch, the first 5 or 10 minutes was actually talking about why this product needs to exist. And he laid out the problem really clearly that exists in the world today, which is that we use mobiles, we use phones, which are filled with apps. And every single time we want to do something, we have to go to a new app. We have to switch context. We have to log in. It's a very kind of clumsy interface. And he views a world where we simply speak to a device and it's able to switch those contexts for us. And so immediately you're like, okay, yeah, I get that. I get why that is an interesting way of dealing with technology. And the demo itself, again, just felt a bit more polished. It felt like they'd rehearsed it a bit better. And there was a lot of humor thrown in there as well. I think with the first, again, the Humane pin, it felt very serious. Again, like the Steve Jobs impression, it felt like it was taking itself way too seriously. And the second one just felt a bit lighter. The product itself was a lot friendlier. I think one of the criticisms, or rather the obstacles with AI, is always going to be this kind of public perception of fear, driven by the kind of media, by the, the portrayal of AI in, Hollywood films has always been quite negative. This device is a little Tamagotchi rabbit thing with a little avatar that speaks to you. And it just immediately feels warmer, it feels friendlier, and those kind of, those opinions wash away very easily. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It just felt like it felt like, the way to distill it is I was presented with a problem and I was offered a solution. And actually him speaking for 20 minutes was the right time to do that. It felt like you needed that context. And so, yeah, it was celebrated, tens of millions of views. They had, I think, 50,000 orders. They were expecting a few hundred. So it really blew up for them.
Look, I respect the attention. I had, within our internal chats, multiple people were talking about it. I walked into the office, people were like enthused. I thought it's a terrible product. I love hardware developments, but it just felt like I know Siri is going to come along and wipe the floor. And I agree with everything you've said, apart from, I think, the delivery. And look, marketing is marketing. I think the story was massively overplayed, meaning that to me wasn't a solution to the mobile. I truly don't think audio in isolation is the solution we need. The reason I say that is there are so many places and times where it's wildly inconvenient to speak. And I'm a voice note person. I'm a person that adores audio. However, I have to assume that everybody pursuing this similar type of novel version of a device, I don't necessarily think it's going to work and scale. There may be an audience for it, and I'd like to be proven wrong, sure. What I did respect about it, I thought I thought the humor element was really great. I'd have actually liked them to come out and lean into that more. I always think with a launch, you now set any kind of launch. It doesn't have to be your first. It can be a campaign. But I think it always sets a new precedence with what you are about to do next. And in that first launch, if you take yourself very seriously, it's very hard to pivot away from that, to ever find a personality within your brand. So if you come out and go all in on personality, I think there's a world where that would have been highly effective. I don't know anything about the company, so I'm speaking very crudely. I would have preferred not the founder to be involved, as much as hypocritical that sounds of me and what we do at Flight Story. But I think there's better merit in telling that story of need through different people's lenses. I think you could have played on the humor, having a young kid showcasing those what I considered quite boring product demos. Play a track from this person. Play me another track. Order me an Uber. Sure, I'd have liked to seen extremely old person interacting with that, extremely young. I think there was a way in the creative narrative where they could have done much better. That all being said, it sounds like they smashed their goals. So who am I to critique?
I mean,
it's a personal preference, right?
They had 10 million views on Twitter, so I don't know how much better it could have been.
Well, Twitter is a pretentious audience, so I will slam. Unless you're in football Twitter, which is
it's sold products. It's sold products for them.
Yeah, I respect it.
For me, the reason I agree, we're still early days. I'm just excited that experiments are happening. And
yes.
I think it's fresh to have new hardware, and fresh to have hardware that isn't black or silver and monochrome. The very orange and bright and playful. I think that's exciting. For me, it's exciting because it does solve, I think there's a huge problem with kind of mobile phone addiction. There's this problem with mobile phone addiction where I do really need my phone. to perform actions like get an Uber, like order food. Like I need those functional things. I don't need Twitter and Instagram grabbing my attention and losing me 2 or 3 hours of procrastination every day. If I could have a device that would allow me to spend a day, maybe it's the weekend, without my phone, but I could still perform things like getting an Uber, like ordering food, like booking a restaurant, I can see that being really compelling. I remember trying to buy, it's called like the Nothing phone, or the Light phone it's called actually, sorry.
Yep.
Which is like a mobile that only has text and calls. But I'm still going to need Uber, and I'm still going to need like Instagram to DM people. Do you know what I mean? It's like not quite what I need, but I do think there's going to be this rejection of mobile phones in the next 5 to 10 years because these apps are developing in a way that they're getting too good at taking our attention, and they're rewiring our brains in a way that I think is just going to be damaging.
I can't disagree with you, although that sounds like a positive step for your mental well-being. You're not super responsive on messages anyway, so I can't fathom a world where you're not addicted to your phone. It's going to be impossible to get hold of the Catman. He's going to be so elusive.
This is the thing. I'm trying not to be on my phone all the time. That's the problem.
I'm joking. Let's conclude. Let's talk about Web3. Historic moment. Every crypto chat I'm in is popping. Flight 3, our Web3 team, are over the moon. They've been telling me the bull is here for some time. First milestone, ETF, Bitcoin ETF. What does this mean for the world? Well, fundamentally, it is a stamp of approval by the American financial authority, the SEC, that grandparents, pension funds, institutional money can now invest in crypto. Great, stamp of approval. More money in the casino. So people are excited about that. Then there's another big moment in March where the Bitcoin halving happens. There's all these kind of, I suppose, Web3 milestones. I think all of this stuff is a distraction to maybe what's going off, the underlying technology, the blockchain that is here to, democratize the internet in a fairer way, to safeguard, to be transparent. Tell me about what is not just the sentiment in Web3 right now. You as a builder in the space, what are you excited about, and what should we as marketeers pay attention to?
I guess an interesting data point here is that there was no mention of the ETF approval in the third web chat whatsoever.
Get away. Not one.
There may have been one post about when the SEC was hacked on Twitter.
Okay.
And they were approved, but no, there was been no celebration in the Slack, or mention of it, because, like you said, whilst there is obviously a huge stamp of approval in terms of the validity and the, I guess, respect of crypto, it doesn't really change anything for the underlying technology and the apps that are being enabled by it. I think the far more exciting kind of moment and milestone, or rather, what the last 6 to 12 months have brought us, and this is why we produced this report, why we released this report yesterday. What we really want to focus on is that there are now a number of applications that are uniquely enabled by blockchain technology. So I'll give you an example. We're working, spend a lot of time working with a company called Courtyard, and they basically allow people to trade rare Pokemon cards, and they do that without ever having to own the Pokemon cards themselves, without having to ever own the physical pieces. And they do that by holding the Pokemon cards somewhere in a vault, and then you trade an NFT, which kind of gives you that digital ownership over that card. And the users who use this app have no idea they're interacting with blockchain technology. It's completely obscured. There's no mention of it. But it means that the app works, and they're able to have this kind of open financial marketplace. And they've had really meaningful traction. They're making serious revenue. They have serious users. That's one, but there's like 5 or 10 that we talk about where, 2 or 3 years ago during the bull market, we talked about this technology, enabling these use cases. And we're now actually starting to see them happen. And we're starting to see tried and tested examples of people building businesses on top of this technology. The really interesting thing is, and the exciting thing is, that a lot of the time the blockchain is completely obscured. And so that for me is the exciting thing. And, you know, Bitcoin ETF, Ethereum ETF, none of that will actually make a difference to this. But what it does do is put more eyeballs on the industry and hopefully will enable us to tell these stories and reach more people, which is obviously exciting. But there's a huge amount of optimism in the air right now. There are, you know, we're seeing, I guess, what you'd call like recurring revenue happen in crypto. Where before, if you looked at like the revenue of big Web3 companies, it was drop something, release a token, release an NFT collection, make $10 million in one day, and then make nothing for 12 months after and figure out what the fuck to do. Now we're seeing companies who have figured out, okay, I can make 100 grand a month. I can make 50 grand a month. And that is, I think, the inflection point, because now there's businesses that can sustain over long periods of time, and they are uniquely enabled by blockchain. And that, I think, is what we internally are excited about.
Yeah, I love that. And I've always felt there's a role for a really strong role for the blockchain and verification. As more and more of our lives are being digitized, I think we can create better, faster, more efficient systems. And I know for a long time you've been an advocate as the blockchain is really an infrastructure play. I am curious, one last question. AI, what are the internal rumblings of blockchain and AI within your walls? Are your teams and your developers, are they talking about the complementary nature of these technologies, or are they still sitting in silo in terms of how you think about them?
So we use AI a lot for a lot of our business processes. Like we have AI bots for all of our support, customer support. We have AI, AI is used in all of our content marketing. That feels separate. I think what you're asking is, how does Web3 and AI work together to enable something, or potentially is Web3 used to verify content in the world of AI?
Yes.
We haven't seen anything meaningful come of that yet. I feel like, again, it's a concept at this stage. We haven't seen like a big startup or a company tackle this that have come through our doors. But I guess the concept is there, right? Where in a world that is going to be dominated by content where we have no idea what the source is, whether it's real, blockchain is there to kind of verify the original piece, or to say that something is real. There's already a bunch of decentralized social networks, right, where these posts are minted on chain. So in theory, there might be some photo which is somebody has posted on one of these decentralized social networks. If somebody in the future was to edit it, shop it in some way, you could almost point to this the original on-chain verification of it. But beyond that, it hasn't been something we've really breached yet.
Yeah, I'll give one anecdote, and probably the more interesting, or when I think, and it's still conceptual, but I think it's a practical user case. One of the things that AI isn't given enough credit for is processing information and automation. When people generally think of the word artificial intelligence, what most people are describing is general intelligence. When people talk about AI, today, in the context of AI, they're talking about generative AI. What I find interesting is the use of narrow AI to automate and process information very quickly, to create a more frictionless ecosystem. So, you talk about interoperability to move between ecosystems, between companies, between applications, with my verified identity and my, everything that represents me and who I will be in the future. I think that's where it starts to get interesting. And the blockchain in isolation has massively failed to deliver on that, or even come close to giving that or laying out a roadmap for that to be plausible. I think in the construct of what AI is capable to do and the progression we're seeing, I think that's where maybe the two come together. But again, we're just building systems to provide slightly better solutions than what exists today. And I think that's kind of progress. Dude, one last thing I want to say. When are you getting a Memes&Machines t-shirt?
Good question. When am I getting a Memes&Machines t-shirt? I'd like a hoodie, actually. It's getting pretty chilly here. I don't think a t-shirt would be much use.
You know what? We are going to do a hoodie drop if you get some proper lighting and a microphone. Look at me. I stepped up. I brought a MTV Video Music Award replica, and here you are. Anyway, I'm out, dude. Have a great week, and we'll chat soon.
See ya.
Cool.
Next week, I'm gonna order a ring light and a microphone for next week. Okay. No, I'm still fine. Let's still talk.
Wonderful. I hope your girlfriend makes you cold as you to that promise now she's heard.
She will. You'll hold me to that. She's got a live. It was her first live listening of the podcast.
Yeah, I'd love actually. What did she think of England? What did she think of Manchester, Cheshire?
What do you think of Manchester? What do you think of Cheshire? Ollie's asking. It was nice, she said. The thing is, she's seeing like Macclesfield and Knutsford, and so she thinks Manchester is this kind of quaint, beautiful village.
I thought you should have gone to Vodka Revs.
No, she's very impressed by
Deansgate Locks, Vodka Revs. Loved it.
Yeah. We've been to Manchester a few times already, and mate, trust me, it's you'd be surprised. England is a nice place, comparatively to the rest of the world.
Oh, absolutely. You know what? I every time I go somewhere, I go, if we just had slightly better climate, UK,
Yeah,
great
right.
infrastructure, roads, just a more predictable, pleasant weather.
Yeah,
It'd be worlds
we were
apart.
we went to the Yorkshire Dales for my brother's birthday, like had a joint birthday, and yeah, fucking hell. Like at first, I mean, probably be when I was younger, but you go now and you realize that there are parts of England that are just like stunning, like.
Yeah,
Like,
look
like,
at Jay's ears picked
like
up when he
movie
said
sets.
Yorkshire Dales. He was well into that. He really got into that. Right, I'm going to drop a plug. Let's get a little plug now. We just finished up. We went through... In this week's Memes&Machines, episode 20. Are we episode 20? I think we are.
Pretty good.
When we get to episode 23, technically we are in the top 1% of podcasts of all time, because very few podcast creators ever make it to episode 23. We're nearly there. In this week's episode...
That was good.